We now come to debate entitled the matter of cyber-flashing-related harms, and I call Fay Jones to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Gray. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair. I beg to move that this House has considered cyber-flashing-related harms. Could I start by explaining the perverse act of cyber-flashing before we go on? In essence, it is where a person is sent an unsolicited sexual image. But there are two currents to this. The first is through social media. More often than not, indecent images are persistently sent to Instagram, Snapchat or Twitter accounts. The second, more perverse angle is where an image is received in a public place, on your device just because your Bluetooth or AirDrop happens to be on. It often happens in public places such as trains or buses or lecture halls where you are in close proximity with people you do not know. It happens to men and women of all ages and sadly is only ever increasing. It can be intimidating and distressing. But more than that, if you receive an indecent image from a stranger in a public place, you are in a very vulnerable position. You are often alone with your perpetrator. Sometimes the perpetrator is there, deliberately watching you, waiting for your reaction. It's a way of creating anxiety, a feeling of being watched and a lack of safety, with the inherent threat that it could be followed up with a physical act of sexual harassment or violence. There is evidence to show that cyber-flashing in this way is the gateway offence to more serious acts of violence. The man who killed Sarah Everard was himself accused of flashing before he went on to commit his horrific crime. It's time that we made cyber-flashing a criminal offence on a par with its counterpart, its physical counterpart, and to ensure that the law catches up with technology. I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and she has done some incredible work around cyber-flashing and highlighting the seriousness of it. Would she agree with me that it needs to be a specific criminal offence alongside public sexual harassment, which I would love to hear the Minister's views on when she winds up?
I thank the Chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee, not just for her intervention, but for the work she has also done in this space. I do agree with her, and I'd be interested to see or hear the Minister's response to that later on. At present, if you are a victim of cyber-flashing, the avenues to seek justice are limited at best. The Indecent Displays Act 1981, which criminalises the public display of indecent matter, are little known and likely to be little used. Laws on image-based sexual abuse are not based on an understanding of power and entitlement as the factors behind perpetration of sexual harassment. They focus too narrowly on perpetrator motivations and do not provide the protection of anonymity for complainants, which I think is crucial. Now, this is not an entirely new or recent problem, and I am not the first to raise the need to criminalise cyber-flashing in this place. And I do want to pay tribute to honourable friends who have partnered with the magazine Grazia, including my right honourable friend, the member for Basingstoke, who has endorsed this campaign. But since I've started talking about making cyber-flashing an offence in its own right, I've received not just many messages of support, but countless emails and social media messages from women who have been subjected to this cruel act. And I particularly want to pay tribute to the television actor and personality Emily Atack, who came here to Parliament, invited by my honourable friend, the member for Stroud, to talk about her experiences. I explained that I had sent her a message on Instagram asking to work with her on this campaign. She apologised to me because she never saw the message because her account is so deluged with indecent images. So I do really want to congratulate Emily and others for having the courage to speak out. So one field in which this is extremely common is on online dating apps. And I've been working with the app Bumble, who say that cyber-flashing is shockingly prevalent in the UK and disproportionately affects young women. According to a survey that they had carried out, 48% of millennial women said that they had been sent an unsolicited sexual image in the last year alone. 1 in 4 of those that they surveyed found that the prevalence of unsolicited lewd images had gotten worse during the COVID-19 pandemic, whilst 1 in 3 believed that cyber-flashing had become part and parcel of online behaviour. And Mr Gray, I don't know about you, but I find this shocking. If we can agree on one thing this afternoon, it is that the unsolicited sharing of lewd images is not a part of normal courtship. Education is one way by which we can seek to address this growing problem, for young people to be made aware of the harm that this act can inflict on someone. This is already happening thanks to campaign-led organisations like Brooke, who provide relationships and sex advice in schools throughout England and Wales. They are also spending this freezing cold Tuesday afternoon sitting in College Green with their advertising van, and I would encourage all members, if you have a moment, to go and show your support for their campaign to ban cyberflashing, and I credit them for being hardy enough to stay there all afternoon today. Their campaign to raise awareness of the harm caused by cyberflashing is based on changing people's behaviour, on educating around consent. It is illegal to send someone younger than 18 an indecent image, yet almost half of millennial women who've received such an image were younger than 18 the first time it happened. This figure rises to 71% of 18 to 24-year-olds. What is illegal offline should be illegal online, and to achieve this, the law needs strengthening. In June 2018, the government introduced the Voyeurism Act, which sought to make upskirting a specific criminal offence. This is a prime example of how the law is involved in catching up with technological advancement. I certainly will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I congratulate her not just on securing this debate, but on her fantastic campaign. She's talking about the law keeping up, and it seems to me that one of the key problems we have when it comes to offences using digital technology is that the speed at which criminals exploit technology, in this case to sexually harass people, mainly women, far outstrips the speed of our legislative process. And whilst it's important that we get things right, would my honourable friend agree with me that we need to take steps to speed up our response to new sexual offences like upskirting, like threats to share intimate images, and like cyberflashing, so that we can better protect people sooner?
I would absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I think this is an area where government and technology companies need to be working hand in hand and at pace in order to catch up. Because in the case of upskirting, until the specific offence had been properly legislated for, it was the case that a best alternative offence was used in order to prosecute offenders. And this was outraging public decency, and victims deserve better than this. In 2018, the Women and Equalities Committee made a recommendation that cyberflashing itself must be addressed by government. It said that government needed to create a new law on image-based sexual abuse which criminalises all non-consensual creation and distribution of intimate images, including altered images and threats to do so. This should be a sexual offence based on the victim's lack of consent and not on perpetrator motivation, and also include an automatic right to lifelong anonymity for the complainant, as with other sexual offences. Now, some 4 years on from that, if the government wishes to make its online harms bill a gold standard for internet safety, and I commend the government for its ambition in this regard, then it must include legislating against cyberflashing. I was concerned by the report published yesterday by the DCMS committee, which said that as currently drafted, it is not robust enough to tackle some forms of illegal and harmful content. Now, I believe the online harms bill is the vehicle by which we can give victims the power to seek prosecution and hold perpetrators to account for their actions. This has been backed by the Draft Bill Committee and by the Law Commission's own recommendations. And I was absolutely delighted that at the end of last year, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, when questioned by my right honourable friend, the member for Romsey, and thank you, confirmed that he agreed that cyberflashing should be made a criminal offence. That was later echoed by the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. So I believe we are on the right track, but I would press the Minister to go as far as she can, and also to say when we can see more details on the online harms bill. Certainly.
Thank you, and thank you for all that she's doing. As we know that most cyberflashing is sent from anonymous accounts, which makes it all the more scary, particularly when they may be in the same vicinity as the victim. Does my honourable friend agree with me that tackling anonymity online and anonymous abuse is a key part of dealing with cyberflashing and also being able to track the perpetrators?
We are in danger of all agreeing with each other, but I think that's a very good thing. And I do want to pay particular credit to my honourable friend, the member for Stroud, who has done so much work on anonymity itself through her 10-minute rule bill. I think this is absolutely crucial. And I think social media companies also have a huge role to play in this. But going back to the point on consent, which I touched on earlier, I would like to put on record my thanks to Professor Claire McGlynn, who has been a leading figure in the campaign to legislate for a consent-based offence. It is critical that any new law is comprehensive, covering all forms of cyberflashing, therefore giving all victims the reassurance they need.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
Certainly, yeah.
And can I congratulate my honourable friend on securing this really important debate, and we all wait for the Minister's response. And she touched on the issue of a consent-based approach, because that touches on the core wrong, which is it is a non-consensual sexual act. But does she join me in urging the Minister to look at what's happening in Texas, California, New York, Virginia, Wisconsin, all of whom are adopting a consent-based approach when legislating for this event?
I absolutely do agree with my right honourable friend. I think if we look at it through the prism of consent, that is empowering to victims, and it is lowering the threshold by which people could take this forward. Consent is extremely important here. The lawful, consensual sharing of images between adults is a fine and appropriate thing if it involves free choice. But I think it's really important to recognise when that crosses a line, and that is through consent. As I was saying, a consent-based offence covers all forms of cyberflashing, regardless of the motives of the sender, to my right honourable friend's point. Motive requirements create an unjustified hierarchy of abuses and victims which do not reflect victims' experiences. Technology companies, the media, politicians, employers all have a part to play in developing policies and practices to challenge everyday sexism, structural sexism, and harmful sexual behaviours. And I want to point out the work that Bumble is doing here. Bumble is a dating app where women initiate the conversation, and their ethos is around protecting those who use their app. They have, not only do they have a one strike and out policy if you report somebody for lewd activity, they also have private detector technology, which recognises an explicit image, blurs it, and then offers the recipient the chance to either view it or block the sender. That is industry leading, and I do commend them for taking that approach. And they have been involved in other initiatives around the world, which my right honourable friend mentioned. I think I best draw my remarks to a conclusion, because I know we do all want to hear from the Minister, Mr Gray, but I really do think it is imperative that we act to criminalise cyberflashing in England and Wales as soon as possible. Every day, without an offence in place, means that victims are denied an effective route to justice. So let's lead the way by continuing the progress that the government has already made and make cyberflashing illegal once and for all. Thank you very much.
Victoria Atkins.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Gray. May I say what a pleasure it is to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you for your munificence in holding until I raced my way here this afternoon. And can I also thank my honourable friend, indeed my friend, the member for Brecon and Radnorshire, for her ability to get this debate today, but also importantly for all the work that she has done really since she first entered Parliament on this vital issue. When I look across at my right honourable friends in this chamber, I genuinely see here a group of very, very committed female parliamentarians who are doing everything they can from the backbenches to ensure that women and girls are protected in our society. And I'm going to try, if I may, to reference them during my response as well. I would very much reiterate the horror that my honourable friend has set out of some of the experiences that we know about through campaigning organisations such as Brooke, but indeed other organisations as well, and the experiences of women, whether they're travelling on public transport or in other, just going about their day-to-day lives, having these images thrust upon them, inserted into their lives without any consent or their agreement at all. And my right honourable friend, the member for Basingstoke, raised the issue of consent. I think this is an absolutely valid point, and indeed she herself has been doing really groundbreaking work in highlighting the threat of deep fake pornography. I think we are only just beginning to see, sadly, what a pernicious effect this form of pornography has and the potential for it. But my right honourable friend is very much leading the campaign and the awareness raising of these new ways in which criminals and others are using the internet. My honourable friend for Brecon rightly said that the Prime Minister quoted the Prime Minister in his response when he was asked in PMQs by my right honourable friend for Romsey about cyber flashing. And he said, I don't care whether flashing is cyber or not. It should be illegal. And in his own inimitable way, he has set out, I think, the government's approach to this. We absolutely support the development of such an offence, and we are considering very carefully an offence along the lines of that proposed by the Law Commission. My honourable friend has asked whether the Online Safety Bill may be the vehicle through which that law is brought about. We are actively looking at that, but we do understand very much the need for speed and indeed the wish of women and girls around the country that this is dealt with quickly and effectively. As my honourable friend has set out, there are offences, criminal offences that already exist that may serve to deal with some of these situations, and she's listed a few of them. But we do recognise that there are potential problems that may limit the application of some of these offences, including, for example, in our discussions with the police and Crown Prosecution Service, they have raised with us the practical difficulties of using Section 66 of the Sexual Offences Act of 2003, because that particular offence requires that the genitals exposed are those of the offender, which may, of course, be very difficult to prove. If a woman is receiving this photograph in a crowded bus or a crowded tube, by definition, that can be an almost impossible element in those situations to prove. And so we very much understand that there is a need to change the law and also to reflect upon the impact that this can have on women and girls going about their day-to-day businesses. They may be distressed, they may be worried, they may be humiliated, and they may be frightened. Imagine, if you would, walking home from or getting a bus home from school in the dark winter's night, and this image pops up on a 15-year-old girl's phone, and she will be worrying, I imagine, what will happen to her when she gets off that bus to make her journey home. So we absolutely understand it. And this is why, as a result of the concerns expressed by my honourable friend and others, we asked and indeed wider concerns about the development of new technology and how it is being used by perpetrators to commit offences. We very much wanted to understand whether the law as it is at the moment has kept pace with modern behaviour. And that is why we asked the Law Commission to review the law on harmful online communications to ensure that if change is needed, that we do so in the right way. They reported last year. I'm extremely grateful to the Law Commission for their report, and they recommended, amongst other things, a new criminal offence relating to cyber flashing. It is worth noting, and indeed my honourable friend in her usual thorough manner did exactly this, worth highlighting that this offence is increasing in its prevalence. In 2019, according to British Transport Police, there were 66 reports of cyber flashing compared to 34 reports in 2018 and just 3 reports in 2016. And of course, as campaigns such as my honourable friends get more and more traction, we are very, very alive to the risk that we will hear more instances, because women and girls will know that they are not the only ones to be suffering from this, and they will have, I hope, the confidence to report these incidents to the police. And so, having commissioned the Law Commission review of the law, we're very much now working on that to ensure that we can change the law in order to reflect the realities of life in the 21st century. My right honourable friend for Romsey, in her usual again, thorough and quite rightly pressing way, invited me to discuss the issue of public street harassment or public sexual harassment. Again, we, through the Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, we have looked at this phenomenon because we very much hear from campaigners that they believe not just the nature but the frequency of such incidents has got worse and more prevalent over time. We very much keep under review the existing offences that are in place, but I know that my right honourable friend will continue to be a very strong advocate for a change of law in this area. Of course I give way.
Will she very briefly reflect that it's not just campaigners and me and members across the House, it's also the Law Commission now?
Indeed, I was just about to come on to the point that she has been joined by, if I may say, excellent company in the form of the Law Commission, and she will, I know, appreciate that we're taking, again, a little bit of time just to consider that carefully. My honourable friend spoke about the online safety bill as being the perfect vehicle for such a change in the law, and we're, as she would expect, working closely with our DCMS colleagues to explore that as a potential. People ask, well, why wasn't this, reference was made indeed to the Select Committee report that was published this week, and we invited the House to join us in drafting this piece of legislation through pre-legislative scrutiny. She will know that a joint committee reviewed it very carefully, and of course all of those considerations will be taken into account as DCMS takes the bill forward. And then my honourable friend from Rushcliffe made the fair point, which is that whilst the House looks to legislate, the government looks to legislate in due course, of course there's nothing to stop internet companies from acting now. We should absolutely encourage these tech companies to take consideration of their own moral duties to the public in this regard. They don't need to wait for us to pass a law. They can do the right and the decent things themselves to stop women and girls suffering from this sort of behaviour. So I would like, if I may, to reassure my honourable friend and all of my colleagues that have joined us here this afternoon that we are actively and carefully considering the Law Commission's recommendation regarding cyberflashing, and we are very much looking to identify a legislative vehicle as we aim to introduce a new specific offence to criminalise cyberflashing.
The question is, this House considered the matter of cyberflashing related harms. Many opinions say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. We now come to the next debate, and I think